sent those 3 letters, and they became public. Now, I think that's very, very noteworthy because it speaks to the grace of God and the power of God also. But that's rabbinic tradition. That's not in the Bible. That's rabbinic tradition. But it's something that you could see happening. So you just take that and put that, file that away. It's a little Bible trivia or extra biblical trivia, but it's interesting, at least. So then he says to the priest, he said, what you guys need to do is you need to lead up, you need to walk up to the river, and you need to step in to the river. Your feet are going to get wet. Now then he says to the people, verse 9, Joshua told the Israelites, come and listen to what the Lord your God says. Today you will know that the living God is among you. That's one of my favorite little lines in this whole chapter. Today you're going to know the living God's with you. There's lots of gods kicking around. You go into a restaurant, you see little gods hanging up there, little Buddha dudes on the front counter with the little oranges and the instant. No, I always wonder why they never eat their oranges. Very ungrateful. But anyway, whatever. I'm not here to judge. I'm just saying. And you see all this kind of stuff going on, and stuff. And there's lots of gods, lots of them out there. I was driving our German friends up into Canada. There's a street up there in Richmond, and they've got, I think I told you, they got a whole street of temples now. They got the Muslims, the Sikhs, the Buddhists, there's a Jewish synagogue there, a couple of evangelical churches, Spirit-filled church, and they're all on this one street. It's like Mars Hill. And it's every philosophy. The Eckankar is there. The little ponytail guys with the bald heads, the Baha'i guys, they're there. They're all on this one street. They've all got little temples and things. It's just it's like a little spiritual mall. It's true. But the living God is the one that's important. You're going to know that the living God is among you. You can have any God you want, but when the chips are down, you might want to have the living God. Just saying. Right? Think about that. If you're going to choose a God, why don't you have a living one? Because I don't know about you, but dead things aren't that useful. Yeah, we have a great dog. He's a dead dog, but he's a great dog. He doesn't bark much anymore, and he's not much for watching, but we love Spot, and he's a dead dog, but we just couldn't get rid of him after he died. So I know he smells a little bit, but hey, we kind of put powder on him and stuff, but we have a dog. We always want a dog, and so here's our dog. He's a dead dog. Well, that's no good. If you're going to have a God, you need to have a living God. You want one that is the God of heaven and earth. He will surely drive out the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites ahead of you. That's a lot of ites. And the reason why God was going to do that was because the people of Canaan were wicked. They had, for a half a millennia, they had been living in gross and terrible sin. And now Israel was being raised up to be a vehicle of God's punishment. And the bigger factor that Israel was a holy nation and could not live inside that environment and remain holy. Now here's the dilemma that we face today as a modern culture. We're living in a similar time as the Canaanite time. We're living, as I said a few weeks ago, in a sodomite culture. We're living in I just finished a 2-day debate with a former colleague of mine on this issue about, he wrote an article, A Christian Response to the LGBTQ S5 106 910 1500 group. And he said in his article, and this is the part that made me respond, I was letting him talk until I read this one sentence that he said, we need to understand that we shouldn't judge those who love differently. And that was the terminology he used as a Christian. Those who love differently. So I wrote him back and I said, now listen, I'm going to challenge you because you are saying that love differently is now on somehow the same par or the same level as God's love. Now God is love. We know that. God designed love. And God's love is not man's love. God's love is very different. And you see it in the agape, the phileo, and the eros. God has a very defined form of love that he designed. Now, that's the parameter of love that God designed. So the minute you say those who love differently is the same as this, then you're now equating, you're now elevating this with that. You can't do that. You cannot call what man is perverting as the same thing as what God has created. It's a very big deal. And the language we use on these issues are vital. And I challenged him. I said, your language is really bad. I understand that we're to love people. But to equate sexual perversion as simply loving differently is not being true to what love is. And I want you to be able to think about that and articulate that to your friends and neighbors because it's coming up. And so different is not the same. Hello? And so you can't equate something that's perverted with something that is not perverted and just say, well, it's different, so therefore it's the same. It doesn't work that way. Sour milk is not the same as fresh milk. Well, it's just milk that's different. Granted, but I'm not drinking this. Okay? It's true. You know? Your boat has a hole in it. It's a different kind of floating. Well, you're going to sink. Different is not the same as. I'm surprised that people aren't getting this, but then again, I'm not totally surprised. And so we went back and forth. And I said, we make a big mistake when we try and use politically correct language. We are called to speak truth, but to wrap up the truth with compassion. And my compassion is I will talk to anybody in any lifestyle, and I will help them see if they're willing to examine their lifestyle in light of biblical truth. I will help them, and I'll do it with compassion and give them lots of time to figure it out. But I'm not going to use politically correct language to confuse the issue that's already confused. Canaan was full of it, and so are we in America today. Well, here's the thing. You can trot along like that for a season, and because God is gracious, it's almost like, well, there's no consequence. But the problem is that the clock runs up. And then it becomes Judgment Day. And now it's Judgment Day in the land of Canaan, and look at what God's going to do. He says the living God is going to show up, and I'm cleaning it up. That's a heavy thing. The question, and some have raised this question, there's now a modern monastic movement. The monastic movement was a group of people in the Dark Ages that left society to preserve Christianity. They said society is so corrupt right now that if we stay in the culture, the gospel will be corrupted. So we're going to pull away from the culture. We're going to live in communities where the gospel can remain pure and separate. And when the culture basically vomits up on itself, we'll go back and preach the gospel when they're ready to hear it. It's a very interesting concept. And so there's a new movement today of monastic groups that are pulling themselves away from our culture because they say, we'll never stay pure living in this mess. And they have a point. Now, God is able to give us the power to live godly in an impure world, and I believe that's what he's called us to do. But I also respect those that say, you know what? We need to pull away too. I respect both those schools of thought. Don't totally agree, but I respect it. Well, here's what's going to happen. He says, now, look, verse 11, the Ark of the Covenant which belongs to the Lord of the whole earth. Notice that. He's the God of the whole earth. He's the God of the whole earth. He will lead you across the Jordan River. Now choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. They're going to be called on later to set up a memorial. The priests will carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth. As soon as their feet touch the water, the flow of water is going to be cut off upstream, and the river will stand up like a wall. So here's what happened. This was different than the Red Sea crossing. The water's coming down from the Sea of Galilee down the River Jordan. And so what happens, the priests hit the water, and the water just stood. And then all the water below it just flowed down, continuing into the Red Sea. So what opened up was a great big wide freeway of crossing, and it was dry ground. That's the miracle to me. There's two miracles, the water standing up and the dry ground. It takes days. It takes days for sand to dry out. Thank you. But it dried out immediately. Now, in closing, so the people left their camp to cross the Jordan, and the priests who were carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. It was the harvest season, and the Jordan was overflowing its banks. But as soon as the feet of the priests who were carrying the ark touched the water at the river's edge, the water above that point began backing up a great distance away at a town called Adam, which is near Zarethan. And the water below that point flowed on to the Dead Sea until the river bed was dry. Then all the people crossed over near the town of Jericho. I love the fact that Jesus shows up, that God shows up, and he closes the wilderness wandering with the same kind of miracle he started it 40 years earlier. That's how faithful God is. There's no solution without faith, and there's no solution without obedience. God is calling you to take a step of faith into the river. Put your feet in the river today. It's a river of life. Meanwhile, the priests who were carrying the Ark of the Lord's covenant stood on the dry ground in the midst of the riverbed, and as the people passed by, they waited there until the whole nation of Israel had crossed the Jordan on dry ground. The closest God's people got to his presence was when they were following in faith. They all had to walk by the ark. It's probably the closest they ever got to it. The closest you'll ever get to the Lord is when you're walking in faith in some adventure. Because that's how God works. He's going to whisper into your ear direction. He's going to whisper insight. He's going to whisper things because you're following him in a direction. And I just want to encourage you today to step in to the river. Don't wait on the banks. Be one of the first to go. Be one of the first to step in. Don't be afraid because the God of the whole earth is on your side, man. The living God. And he's inviting us as a church, and he's inviting you as an individual. He's inviting you as a family to step into something new. Step into something bigger than yourself. Step into something glorious that he wants to do in the city. Step into it. Step in. We're going to close our service today, and I'm going to ask our prayer team. We're going to do a little differently today. I'm going to ask two of our prayer team people to stand at the back door, two over this back door, and some at the front and some at the front. I want it so you can't escape. No, I'm just kidding. I want it so it's easy for you to get prayer. No, I just want it so it's easy for you to get prayer today. Okay? So I want to make it as easy as possible for you to step in. But I'm going to ask Janet to come, and she's going to share something that came up in our prayer time this morning I felt was really important. It's a story of how a camel is loaded and unpacked. So Janet, come up and just give us that story, because I believe it really opens the door to what the Lord wants to do for us this morning before we leave. Is this on? Yeah, okay, there we go, Janet. Bless your heart.
Hi, everybody. This morning in prayer, someone prayed and decreed that we were approaching and entering an oasis. And that triggered in me a word study that I had encountered some years ago in the Holy Spirit-filled Bible called Word Wealth. And it explained the word commit, which Pastor has talked about this morning. Commit. And in the Hebrew language has word pictures for the words. And the word picture for the word commit was a picture of a camel coming out of a barren wilderness, approaching an oasis, but the camel is heavy laden. as Pastor has brought forth, we can be heavy laden as camels, and we can have our life feel like it's a wilderness. But the Lord wants us to come to him as the oasis. In the new covenant, Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for you will find rest for your soul." I'm meek and lowly. You will find rest for your soul. So the word commitment in the Hebrew has this picture of a heavy laden camel approaching an oasis. And so how is the camel unloaded? The camel comes and kneels down and rolls the weight of what he's been carrying onto the ground, and servants come and unpack him. This is what actually happens with heavy laden camels. They have to kneel down with those long legs, roll the load off, and be unloaded. So today, I believe the Lord is inviting us to come to him, to examine what we've been carrying that's heavy. And whether it be traditions, whether it be guilt, whether it be discouragement or doubt and unbelief, whatever it is, to take note of it. Bow down, roll the care off on Jesus, and let those weights be lifted from you so that you can walk in newness of life. And that's what he came to do, to unburden us so we can walk forward in his power.
Amen.
So hallelujah.
Great. Isn't that a great word? So I'm going to invite you to stand. Let's stand together this morning. And I'm going to ask, am I on? Check. Hello? Hello? Am I on? I'm going to ask our prayer team go to those places, and we need a couple up here in the front. We got two at the back. You got anyone? Okay, Janelle, we got a few others going back that way. Good. Before you leave today, no matter, maybe you're a student here today and you're thinking, oh man, the fall's coming, and what am I going to do for studies, or what am I going to do for my courses, or maybe you're needing prayer for your business or a family sickness, or whatever the burden is. It doesn't matter. There's no wrong or right burdens. But just allow the Lord to roll that off of you today. The humble part that Janet was talking about was there's a kneeling, there's a coming. I need some help to be unloaded. And take that today. Take that help. Receive that help so that you can be free from whatever you're carrying. And we just want to bless you today as we continue to move forward with God. Father, I thank you for my friends, Lord, and as we just spend a few more minutes in worship today and just waiting upon you, Lord, any here right now, Lord, that are going, I'm tired. I'm so tired of carrying this load. I need to roll it off on Jesus. As we purify ourselves, as we get ready, as we get urgent, as we move across the river into the promised land of blessing, Lord, I don't want to be carrying this load anymore. I don't want to carry it into this new season, into the summer, Lord, into the fall. I need to be free from it, Jesus. And so, Lord, you know what you're doing, and you know the hearts that you're speaking to, and I pray right now that you would just do your work your way, gently by your Spirit. Let every person know how much they're loved. Let every person know, Lord, today how much they're valued by you, and that you've made a way for all of us if we'll simply just come. Amen. Nick, lead us in worship.